Salam, peace be upon you. Part 31. The Epistemic Humility Seal. It sounds gentle, but it is not a soft virtue. It is an operational discipline. It is the firewall that protects the program from the oldest and most seductive error, thinking we can grab phi with words. Because the moment you think you have grasped phi directly, you have already smuggled in what phi is supposed to precede. A distinction between the thing grasped and the one grasping. You have smuggled in an object. You have smuggled in a point of view that acts like a camera standing outside the universe. You have smuggled in a stage. And the whole point of our foundation was to earn the stage, not assume it. So let me say this seal in the simplest possible way, in a way you can carry like a small stone in your pocket. We do not pick up the ground, we stand on it. We do not hold phi like a tool. We notice what becomes possible because phi is there. We do not describe phi as a thing. We point to the signatures it leaves in what can be tested, shared, and reconstructed. That is epistemic humility. Now, to make this real, let's step away from philosophy and go to places you already understand. Imagine you are trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. You can see the world because you have eyes. You can see mountains, rivers, carpets, faces. But you cannot look directly at your own eyes from inside your own head. If you try, you will end up with a strange failure. You will attempt to turn the instrument of seeing into the object seen. Without a mirror, it cannot be done. So what do? You don't invent a story that you saw your eyes directly. You use what is allowed. You use a mirror, or a photograph, or the way people react when they look into your eyes. You infer your eye color from what survives public comparison. You point indirectly through operational signatures. Phi is like that, but deeper. Not deep as in mystical, deep as in structurally prior. Phi is the condition for distinction. So if you try to describe phi as an object, you have already used distinction. You have already used the very thing you were trying to put into a jar. You cannot bottle the bottling condition. This is why the seal matters. It prevents a loop of self-deception. Let me give you a few images that make this loop visible, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Try to bite your own teeth. Your teeth can bite bread. They can bite rope. They can bite anger into silence when you hold your tongue. But try to bite your own teeth. You will laugh, because the very tool you use is the thing you are trying to use it on. It folds back on itself. Try to measure the length of your ruler using the ruler itself, without any external reference. You can lay the ruler against the table and say, this is 1 meter, but only because you already accept a standard, a calibration, a context. The ruler cannot certify its own meaning from the inside. It can participate in measurement, but it cannot be the ultimate ground of measurement without a loop. Try to write a dictionary entry that defines meaning without using meaningful words. Try to explain language without using language. Each attempt runs into the same wall. The foundational condition cannot be held as one more object inside the system it enables, because the system is the very medium of holding. Phi sits at that level. It is the precondition that lets object, observer, measurement, truth, difference, and even word have a place to stand. So epistemic humility is the refusal to pretend we can do the impossible trick, to step outside comparability in order to compare the ground of comparability. Now notice something important. Humility does not mean we know nothing. Humility means we know what kind of knowing we are doing. There are two ways the mind tries to know. One way is possession. I have it, I can hold it, I can point to it as a thing. The other way is recognition. I can recognize its signature. I can tell when it is present because the world behaves differently. You recognize wind by what it does to leaves, to dust, to flags, to your skin. You don't catch wind in your fist and bring it home like a coin. You recognize electricity by what it does to bulbs, to motors, to sparks. You don't put electricity itself into a jar and label it. You recognize honesty by what it does over time. Promises kept, patterns consistent, contradictions admitted. You don't open a skull and find honesty sitting there like a stone. Phi must be known in this second way, by signature, not by possession. Now let's bring in an image every weaver understands. Think of the loom. The loom is not the carpet. The loom is not even the pattern. The loom is the condition that makes weaving possible. Can you grab the loom's enabling power as an object inside the carpet? No. The carpet is what appears because the loom's constraint is there. The loom leaves signatures: tension, alignment, repeatability, the ability to keep a row straight, the ability to keep a motif consistent across a long surface. You can point to those signatures. But if you take a knife and cut a small square of the carpet and claim, "Here, this square is the loom," you are confused. You extracted the product and called it the enabling condition. In the same way, if you extract some feature of the world, space, time, energy, mind, matter, a field, an equation, and call it phi, you are cutting a square out of the carpet and calling it the loom. The epistemic humility seal prevents that confusion. It forces us to say phi is not among the outputs. Phi is the permission for outputs to become distinguishable, and thus talkable, and thus testable. Now let's tie this back to what we already sealed in part 29, the negative boundaries. The negative seal said, if you call phi a substance, you will start asking where it is located. If you call it energy, you will start asking how much of it there is. If you call it a field, you will start asking what its absolute value is. If you call it consciousness, you will start asking whose consciousness. Every one of those questions smuggles in containers, measures, and identities that phi was supposed to precede. Epistemic humility is the psychological counterpart to the negative seal. The negative seal is the fence. Humility is the habit of not climbing the fence. One is a rule, the other is a posture. And without the posture, you can have the rule and still drift. Because humans can obey the letter and cheat with the spirit. We can say phi is not a substance and then treat it like a substance in our imagination. We can say no absolutes and then secretly worship an absolute picture. Humility stops that. So how do we speak about phi? We speak the way an honest engineer speaks about gravity. No engineer claims to hold gravity in their hand. But every engineer designs with gravity's operational signature. What falls, what accelerates, what weight does to beams, what mass does to load. Gravity is known by what it does inside licensed windows of measurement and construction. That is not ignorance. That is the correct epistemic posture. Phi is like that, but even more foundational. Because gravity is already a story told inside the readable universe, while phi is the condition for readability itself. And here is where the word firewall becomes real. A firewall is not a complement. It is a set of constraints that stop a certain kind of failure. In this program, the failure is narrative drift. drifting from what can be publicly checked into what can only be privately imagined. So the humility seal gives us a practical test you can run on any sentence. When you hear a sentence that claims to be about phi, ask, can this sentence be translated into a procedure inside the licensed window, into a comparator, an invariant, a boundary condition, a replication claim? If yes, then it is operationally meaningful. If no, then it may be poetry or prayer or personal intuition, but it is not part of the public cosmogenesis engine. It cannot be allowed to steer the ship. This is not an insult. It is a sorting rule. Just like in a courtroom, some statements count as evidence and some do not. If someone says, I feel he is guilty, it may be sincere, but it is not admissible as proof. If someone says, here is the video, here are the timestamps, here is the chain of custody, now the claim is reconstructible, now it can be tested, now it is public. Humility is the rule of admissibility for foundational language. Let me tell it as a story, because the mind learns firewalls faster through story than through slogans. In the rug factory, when a new apprentice arrived, he always wanted to jump to the beautiful part. He wanted to choose colors and draw flowers. He wanted to improvise. He wanted to be creative before he was disciplined. So the master weaver did something that looked cruel, but it was mercy in disguise. For the first week, he did not let the apprentice touch a single color. He handed him plain thread, one color only, and he made him practice tension. Pull, release. Pull, release. Not because tension is the whole carpet, but because without tension, the whole carpet becomes a lie. Patterns drift. Lines bend. The image becomes a rumor of itself. The apprentice complained. But master, I can see the pattern in my mind. I know what I want to weave. The master answered, if you cannot keep tension, your mind's pattern is not knowledge, it is imagination. And imagination is allowed, but it cannot be the foundation. Then, after tension, came the next discipline, counting. The apprentice had to count knots, count rows, keep a rhythm. He learned that a beautiful pattern is not a vision, it is a repeatable procedure. Then came the hardest discipline, correction. The master would deliberately let the apprentice weave a few rows and then stop him and say, undo it. Undoing hurt more than failure. It felt like wasting time. But the master said, this is the law. If you cannot reverse your steps, you are not in control. If you cannot show where you went wrong, you cannot convince anyone you were right. A pattern that cannot be audited is not a pattern. It is a superstition. That is the epistemic humility seal in wool and fingers. It is the discipline of admitting, my private certainty is not enough. My vision is not enough. My words are not enough. Only what can be checked earns the right to be called real in public. Now imagine a different scene. A house has been built in a village. It looks strong. The walls are straight, the roof is beautiful, the owner is proud. Then an inspector arrives. The owner says, look at it, it is perfect. The inspector says, I do not care how it looks. Show me the foundation. The owner laughs. The foundation is underground. You cannot see it. The inspector answers, exactly. That is why I do not accept pride. I accept procedure. I accept certificates. I accept tests. I accept declared standards. So the inspector asks, what is the concrete mix? What is the rebar spacing? Where are the load paths? What is the safety margin? Where are the measurements? Who repeated them? What would count as a failure? The owner can be offended, but the inspector is not insulting him. The inspector is protecting the village. Because when the earthquake comes, beauty does not matter. Only the discipline of construction matters. Our Pure Phi Cosmogenesis project is that kind of house, but for thought itself. We are not building a poem, we are building an epistemic shelter that must survive the earthquakes of criticism, translation, and time. So, humility is our first inspection rule. It says, if you claim you see phi directly, you are like the proud owner waving at a roof and refusing to show the rebar. The program does not accept that. Now, here is a practical firewall rule we will carry forward, especially when differentiation begins and the mathematics becomes seductive. Whenever you hear yourself saying, phi is a substance, phi is a cosmic mind, phi is a hidden field behind fields, phi is a secret energy, phi is an absolute phase of the universe, phi is the ultimate thing, stop. Ask, can this be converted into a licensed window, a comparator, an invariant, a reconstruction procedure? If not, it belongs outside the certified foundation. This does not mean it is worthless. It means it is not load-bearing. In a house, decorations matter, but decorations cannot replace beams. In our program, intuition can inspire, but intuition cannot replace falsifiable structure. And humility is exactly the refusal to confuse decoration with structure. Now, let's sharpen one more point, because it will save us later. Humility does not say all models are equal. Humility says every model must declare what it can and cannot do. A humble model is not a weak model. A humble model is a model with declared scope. It says, within this window, with this noise, under these conditions, using these comparators, my claim holds. Outside that, I do not know. That sentence is the opposite of arrogance. It is also the opposite of vagueness. And this is why humility belongs at the start of cosmogenesis. Because cosmogenesis, by its nature, tempts the mind to speak in total sentences. The universe is. Reality is. Everything is. Those total sentences are the easiest place for smuggling. Humility is the scalpel that cuts them down into licensable pieces. It forces us to say, not everything is, but within this operational window, we can reconstruct this invariant. And here is what would make it fail. That is how a project becomes the first of its kind, not by grand claims, but by disciplined claims. So when we say, with seriousness, that Pure Phi Cosmogenesis is a monumental project, we mean this. It must be able to be continued by people who do not know us, who do not trust us, who do not share our language, and who may even dislike our style. It must survive them. That survival is only possible if the foundation is built on public signatures, not private possession. That is epistemic humility. Now you might ask, but doesn't this make Phi unreachable? No. It makes Phi reachable in the only way that matters for a civilization-grade project, by public access. A private vision may inspire art, but cosmogenesis is an engineering discipline. It must survive the hands of strangers. That is why we keep saying, what counts is what survives translation. If you and I speak different languages, Dari, Pashto, English, we can still share a measurement. We can still replicate an experiment. We can still agree on a pattern in the carpet because the pattern can be reconstructed. But a private metaphysical picture cannot be replicated. It cannot be audited. It cannot be falsified. So it cannot be allowed to carry weight in the foundation. This is the heart of the seal. Now, let's make the seal even sharper by stating its prediction and its falsification with the seriousness they deserve. Prediction. Any positive metaphysical description of phi, any attempt to say phi is X as a direct description, will do one of two things. Either it will secretly presuppose comparability, identity, difference, boundary, equivalence, and thus fail to be foundational in the way it claims. Or it will be forced, under pressure, to become operational. It will turn into statements about what can and cannot be measured, shared, reconstructed, and compared in licensed windows. In short, a positive metaphysical description must either cash out operationally or collapse into circularity. Falsification. Give a complete, coherent public description of phi that is non-operational and does not rely, even implicitly, on sameness/difference. Not a hint, not a metaphor. A complete description that does not use comparative structure. If someone can do this, then the seal is wrong. It means there exists a way to speak of the ground of distinction without using distinction, while staying coherent and public. That would be a genuine discovery. But notice how the falsification is protected against cheap tricks. If the description is private, it fails the public condition. If the description is public, it must be shareable, and shareability already relies on comparability. If the description claims to be complete, it already distinguishes complete from incomplete. If it claims to be correct, it already distinguishes correct from incorrect. So the seal is not just philosophical, it is structurally welded into what public meaning is. Now I want to bring this down into your own life, because the listener must feel why this is necessary, not just accept it. Think about love. Can you grasp love directly as an object? You can try to define it, but every definition misses something. What do you actually know when you know love? You know its operational signature. You know what it makes you do, what it makes you endure, what it makes you protect, what it makes you sacrifice, what it makes you forgive. You know what it forbids. Certain betrayals become impossible if love is real. Love is not just behavior, but behavior is the public signature by which others can verify that love is more than a word. If someone says, "I love you," and nothing changes, no care, no responsibility, no consistency, the claim is unlicensed. It may be a feeling, but it is not publicly established. So you see the same pattern. You do not pick up love like a stone. You infer it by signatures and boundaries. Now think about pain. You cannot step into someone else's nervous system and feel their pain directly. But we have built public ways to point at it. Symptoms, behaviors, tests, scales, scans. These are imperfect, but they are the only honest route to shared knowledge. Humility does not deny private experience. Humility refuses to confuse private experience with public fact. Phi is not pain, of course. Phi is more fundamental. But again, the posture matches. We point through signatures, not possession. Now bring it back to science. When a scientist claims a new discovery, they do not say, "Trust my inner vision." They say, "Here is the setup. Here are the boundaries. Here is the comparator. Here is the noise. Here is the replication protocol. Here is what would falsify me." And that is humility. It is not humility in tone. It is humility in architecture. So part 31 is the seal that forces the Holophase program to behave like science from the first inch of ground, not only after the equations appear. Because if we do not seal this now, something ugly will happen later. Later, when we begin differentiation, when we introduce A equals d phi, when we start talking about omega and kappa and nu and jets and defects and holonomies and quantization, the human mind will be tempted to turn the mathematics into metaphysical possession. It will say, "Now we have the universe in a formula. Now we have captured the absolute." And the firewall will crack and narrative drift will enter like a slow leak. So we stop it here, early, at the foundation. We say, even when the mathematics gets strong, our posture stays humble. We point at the ground. We do not pick it up. Now, how does this connect to the end of part 30? Part 30 ended with a promise. We will not begin differentiation yet because the project ahead is too large to rest on an unsealed foundation. We said, we are building pure phi cosmogenesis, the first such discipline project of its kind, and we must prove we are not cheating. The epistemic humility seal is the first proof. So the seal is simple. When you feel the urge to declare an ultimate picture, convert it into a test, or release it. If it cannot be tested, label it as intuition, not foundation. If it can be tested, declare the window and the failure mode, and proceed with courage, patience, and precision. It says, we acknowledge the limit of direct description. We acknowledge that the foundation can only be known by its operational signature. We refuse to smuggle a private metaphysical picture into the place where only public discipline belongs. And once we accept this, we are ready for the next seal. Because if we cannot grasp phi directly, then the very next question is obvious. If we can only know phi through what is operationally readable, what does operationally readable require? That question opens part 32, the windowed locality axiom. No window, no public fact. But we cannot earn that axiom until we first accept humility. Because without humility, we will keep pretending we can talk about the universe as a whole without boundaries, without declared conditions, without comparators, without error models, without reconstruction. Humility is the gate that forces us into licensed windows. So let us stamp part 31 as our first certification. Not a new primitive, not a new object, not a new thing. A discipline, a lock, a refusal to cheat. And now I will give you the listener carry again. Not as a slogan, but as a physical instruction you can feel in your body. When you walk, you do not carry the earth. You trust it. You test it by stepping. You learn where it holds and where it breaks. That is how we will treat phi. We will step into licensed windows. We will test what holds. We will measure what survives. We will declare what would falsify us. We point at the ground. We don't pick it up. Always peace be upon you.